Simulation Assignment by Miles Biermeyer, National American University, online. There were five major categories that divided the PC market: workhorse, Mercedes, cost cutter, traveler, and innovator. These categories help to define what specific groups in each target market are looking for. These groups are very large, but the differences that define them can be easily broken down. The cost cutter category was focused on price. This market group was interested in the lowest priced PCs. The workhorse category was focused on a computer of high quality with a lot of processing power. Mercedes is self-explanatory. This market is strictly for the top of the line PCs. Traveler, again, is self-explanatory. This category is focused on mobility. Innovator is focused on new features. Usability is an underlining desirability in all categories. PCs are rated upon how well they do at what they are designed to do. The main focus of Miles Biermeyer Enterprises in the PC market was the Mercedes, Innovator, and Traveler categories. Miles Biermeyer Enterprises released a PC that had top-of-the-line features and did well continuously throughout the simulation. By the end of quarter 6, the PC market in this category was getting over 30% of the market share. Miles Biermeyer Enterprises also focused on Innovator in the beginning. The company spent a lot of money on R&D developing new capabilities of the PC that was offered specifically to capture this audience. Although the PC did not perform as well as projected, this target customer group became less of a focus as the quarters went by. The percent of market share captured in this market is nothing to brag about. Miles Biermeyer Enterprises rolled out a laptop designed specifically for traveling business professionals. This laptop did better than expected, and by the end of the simulation became the main focus group. Miles Biermeyer Enterprises captured the largest portion of this market compared to all the other competitors. The other two target markets, the PCs did poorly throughout the entire simulation because they were not designed for those target markets. The biggest focus for Miles Biermeyer Enterprises moving forward will be to focus on mobile PCs and top-of-the-line products. That is where the previous products have done the best. R&D money has been expensed to develop even better products for these markets. If Miles Biermeyer Enterprises continues to focus on mobile PC products and top-of-the-line products, it will continue to grow its market share. R&D is finishing up a new feature developed specifically for mobile PC applications that will help to give the company a competitive advantage over the competition. Miles Biermeyer Enterprises expanded sales office locations to all available locations by quarter 6. The reason that the company decided to branch out in so many markets is because some of the markets were being completely ignored by the competition. The United States and Japan were the main focus markets for the company at the beginning because those markets are the most accepting of expensive mobile and top-of-the-line PCs. The incomes in these countries are greater, which means that they are more likely to purchase the higher-end products. This worked well in the beginning, but as the game progressed, the competition in these markets became more fierce. That is the main reason why Miles Biermeyer Enterprises decided to expand into all available markets. Even though the other markets were less likely to buy the higher-end PCs, there was little competition, which enabled the company to capture nearly the entire market share in these locations. When Miles Biermeyer Enterprises expanded into other markets, its overall market share shot up from about 15% to over 20% of the total available market. The company spent less money on marketing, advertising, and sales expenses in these other markets and captured the largest portion. It worked well, but because these markets were so small for Mercedes and Traveler, the overall improvement on the total market share was less than 10%. If Miles Biermeyer Enterprises could have experienced the kind of success it did in the more obscure markets within the United States and Japan, the total market share for Miles Biermeyer Enterprises could have been over 50%. Miles Biermeyer Enterprises expanded the sales force rapidly and aggressively. After the third quarter, Miles Biermeyer Enterprises had the largest sales force and continued to have the largest sales force throughout the remainder of the game. With a well-trained and plentiful sales force, advertisements will drive the customers to the company and have someone there to assist them. More people were employed in the United States and Japan because those markets were larger and more profitable for the company. There was also greater competition, which requires every advantage to overcome. In the other markets, which competitors had little focus, this sales force was much smaller because the target audience in those markets had nowhere else to turn. Larger markets require a greater sales force. Smaller markets can get by with less and still be just as effective. Sales forces are expensive, which is why allocating them correctly is so expensive. Effective advertising needs to not only be developed to grab the target audience attention, but it must also reflect actual representations of the product. Misrepresentations can lead to damaging the brand name and even legal issues. Advertising is expensive, so reaching the audience where they reside is important. Miles Biermeyer Enterprises bought market research every quarter to ensure that ad placement was occurring where the target audience would be looking. The two products were advertised with point-of-purchase displays. They were also advertised much heavier than the other products. The products that were developed for the cost cutters had barely any advertising because it was expected to do poorly, which it did. Advertising would not have made much of a difference because that specific part of the market was too competitive. The placement of effective advertising is all dependent upon the target market. Some target markets will spend more time reading one magazine over another, or might place another type of media preference as its highest priority. The advertising needs to be placed where the target audience will see it and where they will engage it. If the advertising takes place when the audience is not receptive, it is likely that they will simply overlook the advertisement. The content of the ad is also critical. The content of the ad is to be carefully considered when it comes to placement. Some advertisements may be inappropriate in certain markets or ineffective in others. Analyzing the specific market will reveal what key content should be utilized when developing the ad placement technique. Miles Biermeyer Enterprises captured about 20% of the target market after the first quarter. Not many changes were made, and the same products and advertisements were used with only minor changes in quarters 2 and 3. This caused the overall market share of Miles Biermeyer Enterprises to slip to 11%. Drastic changes and investments were utilized to increase overall market share to just over 20% by the end of quarter 6. Taking advantage of underutilized markets of the competitors enabled the company to recoup the market share it had lost in quarters 2 and 3. The only true competitor for Miles Biermeyer Enterprises' flagship product was a company called Pick-a-Tech. This company also focused on the Traveler and Mercedes market. Pick-a-Tech continuously outperformed Miles Biermeyer Enterprises in the American and Japanese markets throughout the entire game. Had this company expanded into all the other markets, Miles Biermeyer Enterprises would have encountered more issues. This competitor had strong products and effective advertising. Pick-a-Tech had the largest overall market share of all the competitors in the game. This fierce competitor was hard to overcome, but the expansion into other markets was an effective strategy. Marketing through the 6 quarters greatly evolved. As each quarter progressed, new advertisements were developed as the products changed. All the products developed by Miles Biermeyer were branded with the Miles name, from Miles Traveler to Miles Office. All the products were marketed under this brand. The branding of the products were a strong positive for the company. The markets began to associate Miles Biermeyer Enterprise products with quality. It was marketed as a brand that you can depend on. This was effective, and the Traveler and Office sub-brands did well throughout the entire game. By the end of quarter 6, the marketing of the brand became even more enforced, emphasizing the Miles brand. The biggest successes for Miles Biermeyer Enterprises came from the Mercedes and Traveler markets. This product performed well, and the advertising campaigns were effective. The amount of market share captured in these markets was strong against competitors. The greatest successes for Miles Biermeyer Enterprises came from the advertising campaigns for the products designed for these markets. Miles Traveler became the #1 sold PC in the Traveler market in Q5. This can be traced back to the quality and reliability of the branding that was developed and enforced for this PC in the market. The biggest failures from Miles Biermeyer Enterprises came from two sources. First was that Miles Biermeyer Enterprises never tried to break into the cost-cutter market. No PC was developed specifically to capture this audience in the later quarters. The PC that developed for the workhorse market performed so poorly that eventually by Q5 it was taken off the market altogether. The other major failure was neglecting to update the advertising for the successful lines in Q2 and 3. This led to a significant drop in the amount of market share the company captured in these quarters. In hindsight, it is clear that the marketing campaign had been stronger in these quarters. Miles Biermeyer Enterprises would have captured a larger share of the overall market. These are the references that were used to complete this presentation. Thanks for watching.